Hello and welcome to another episode of Fully Charged. Now, last week I attended a very prestigious event in London's Park Lane. I went to the What Car Awards. I was invited along by Jaguar Land Rover, which was extremely kind of them. I much appreciate it. I really appreciated it because I actually present quite a lot of awards through the year for various things, usually technology, automotive related stuff. And I didn't have to work that night. I wasn't doing it. It was fantastic. I just sat there and drank red wine. Possibly a tiny bit too much. But that said, it was a really interesting event because the most surprising thing for me, obviously Jaguar Land Rover knew, but they hadn't told me, was that the Reader's Choice Award, this isn't the journalists or the automotive industry, it's the readers of What Car magazine, chose the most exciting car they're most looking forward to in 2018 was the Jaguar I-Pace. It's also a very interesting sign that the vehicle that kind of normal people, not sort of electric car nerds, but normal people are most looking forward to and most excited about is an electric car. There was now, because I have been to this event once before, a few years ago with Nissan, but there is now an Electric Car of the Year award, a specific one just for electric cars. Again, I didn't even know that. And that was won by the new Nissan Leaf, the 2018 Nissan Leaf, which I've just driven, and it is fantastic. And there will be a report coming very soon, because I've gone into real detail about the ProPilot, the sort of automated driving aspects of the car, and also the e-pedal, which is one pedal driving. Really, really works. It's a remarkable step forward. It's a brilliant car. Loved it. Anyway, enough of that. I'm just going to try and catch up with a few juicy bits of news. Now, I remember stating a few years back on Fully Charged that we need to adopt the term clean and cheap alongside the term dirty and expensive when it comes to different ways of producing electricity. We're really in the middle of a transition because what we've got now, the traditional method of generating power, regardless of its environmental cost or its financial cost, it does work. You know, we've got this system, it's taken 100 years to develop. We've got a big network of wires all around the country called the national grid. We've got big power stations that burn fuel, that generate electricity around the clock, regardless of the weather. And what we're introducing is a brand new system that is very different, that requires a different attitude and a different approach. The old system has old market mechanisms that keeps it going. And I've learnt over the last few years that old market mechanisms actually means subsidies. Because the only way you can actually run a coal-burning power plant or a gas-burning power plant efficiently and make money out of it as a big company if you've invested in it, and these are huge investments, is to be paid when it's not producing anything, which is a weird way of having a subsidy. It's a subsidy. It's a huge subsidy. 80% of all the government subsidies towards the power industry around the world are for coal, gas and nuclear. The vast majority, obviously, for nuclear. The smallest section of subsidies around the world is for renewables. Solar panel prices dropped by 26% in 1 year in 2017. That's how much they came down by that. But that is not even considering the fact that in the last 10 years, they've dropped by 80%. Onshore wind has seen the same kind of price drops, 24% per kilowatt hour produced in 2017, 24% drop. And offshore wind is even more staggering. It's a 28% drop in 1 year. Now, both these forms of generated electricity are now globally considered cheaper than any other form of generating electricity. It doesn't matter what it is. And then, of course, there's batteries. And batteries really make a big difference. Now, I know I drone on about batteries a lot, but the cost of batteries has dropped by 75% since 2010. I'm talking lithium-ion batteries. And that's largely due to a massive ramp-up in manufacturing. Now, one of the things that's interesting about that particular statistic is it's not truly reflected in the cost of new electric cars, and I'm going to come back to that in a minute. So, as I said just now, it is perfectly acceptable and scientifically accurate to say clean and cheap and dirty and expensive. But obviously it's not only the energy market. The arrival of electric cars is also having a very disruptive effect on the automotive industry, as I witnessed the other night at the What Car Awards. Car makers can produce a small, cheap petrol car and they can sell it at a loss and still not lose money, because they know, the manufacturers know, that for the coming 5 years, that's where they'll make the money in servicing. And they need oil changes, filter changes, they have gaskets that split, they have catalytic converters that need changing, they have timing belts that stretch and need changing or that break and don't work. An enormous amount of moving parts in an internal combustion engine that constantly needs servicing. We've all done it. I had petrol cars for years. You take it in the garage, that's what you have to do. You don't have to do that with an electric car. I've driven my Nissan Leaf now 62,000 miles. It's had one service, which cost less than £100, and basically they just filled up the washer bottle and washed it because there was nothing to do. In a recent report about the Chevy Bolt in America, they went even further. They essentially said the Chevy Bolt doesn't need any servicing ever. They modified this slightly. It does need a coolant change every 150,000 miles. So do remember to do that if you've got a Chevy Bolt. When you're coming up to 150,000 miles, take it in, have that coolant flush, don't be cheap. They also said you need to change the brake fluid every 5 years or so. So every sort of 75, 80,000 miles, have a little look at the brake fluid, just make sure it's all right. Other than that, just drive it. And that is completely disruptive to the traditional automotive industry as we know it, that relies from a lot of its profits on a massive industry supplying spare parts and servicing. Now, this may have something to do with the fact that electric cars are still slightly more expensive to buy new than petrol or diesel cars. And now to put the lid on the, if we all drive electric cars, we'll have to build 15 new Hinkley Point Cs and we'll melt the grid, all those ones. Those stories that you see in newspapers. Aurora Energy recently released a report which looked into this problem in detail. And the simple fact of the matter is that if we use some very, very simple, easily installed, already installed in electric vehicles, sensible charging timing, this country could now, today, with no increase in any wires and any generating capacity and anything, support 15 million electric cars on the roads of this country now. Currently, we've got about 250,000, so we've got quite a big bit of leeway before we need to start panicking. Now, what we're talking about here is cars that charge when there isn't a high demand on the grid. So there are periods of the day, mid-morning, mid-afternoon, where the demand on the grid is lower, and then obviously at night when we're all asleep, it's very low. So if your car is charging at those points and not at the peak points, first thing in the morning, the early evening peak that goes on every day, that would be really stupid to charge your car then, and that would put a strain on the grid. As soon as you've got an electric car, the one thing you're desperate for is variable tariffs. You want a daytime tariff and a nighttime tariff, and you want them to be different. And there's a lot of pressure on energy supply companies to supply different tariffs because electricity at night is almost free. They don't like you to know that, but the cost is so low because demand is so low and production is so high because of nuclear and wind. Nuclear is constant, wind is variable, but they still, at night, produce an enormous amount of electricity that we don't use, which means the price goes right down, and I don't want to pay a lot of money for that cheap electricity. I want to get it really cheap. I want to be encouraged to use it at night, because that helps balance the grid. And there's one more thing I just quickly want to share, because it is amazing, about Fully Charged. So it's been going, this is its 8th year. It took 2 years to reach 1 million aggregated views across all the episodes I put out. We got 1.8 million views in a month late last year, which I think says two things. One, the number of shows we're putting out and the quality of those shows has improved enormously in the terms of their visual impact, and that's enormously down to the Fully Charged team led by Mark, aka Ink Sharkman on the Twitters. Amazing job he's done. It's a lot to do with the fact that Johnny Smith started to become a regular presenter. He is so good. The shows that are coming up in the next few weeks that Johnny's done are brilliant. But it's also, I think, public interest. The number of subscribers we've had has gone from around 5,000 3 years ago to nearly 250,000. So it's really, a very noticeable change. And I think that is a lot to do with general public interest in the topic. But anyway, I just want to say, thank you for watching. Please continue to watch. Please do subscribe to Fully Charged. If you want to have a look at the little Patreon link under this video, please do. And I'm just going to quickly read out some names of amazing people who support Fully Charged on Patreon for $10 a month or more. So here we go. Anthony Green, Michael Ledford, Anthony Cambray, Dave Dewson, Laura Sanborn, Jeff James, and Christopher Thomas, who was called out by his partner, Michelle Thomas. So, thank you, Michelle and Christopher, but you're very lucky, Christopher. There we go. Anyway, that's all I've got time for. Thank you so much for all those people for supporting Fully Charged. Please continue to watch. There's lots of good episodes coming up soon. And always, as always, if you have been, thank you for watching.